Greetings, and welcome to Beatles Stuffology. We're two old friends sit about and talk BS, Beatles stuff, on a track-by-track basis pretty much for the sake of it. My name is JG McQuarrie, and I'm here with my co-host Andrew Deacon. Say hi, Andrew.
Hello.
How are you doing this week?
I'm doing okay and excited and looking forward to another top-notch B-side.
Okay, and now would you like to tell me the truth?
Well, we'll see how it goes in the next 15 to 30 minutes. Because, hey, I'll jump in and say that we're talking about I'll Get You, the exciting B-side to She Loves You.
Good. Well, I mean, your sincerity and enthusiasm, I think, are radiating out of the speakers as we record this. So it's lovely to know that you have such warm and happy feelings towards this particular track. But perhaps you would care to dive into a little bit more detail and just tell us why this song means so much to you.
Well, okay, right. So, I mean, let's track back a bit. We have to remember we're talking about a B-side, and B-sides don't always have the greatest reputation. I'm not quite sure what happened to the word greatest there. It got spelled anyway, never mind. Whilst I still have the power of speech, I should just remind myself that actually loads of rubbish bands have created loads of awful B-sides. So actually what we've got here is a very modest song that's lacking in the songwriting maturity that the Beatles have developed over this time. And it just feels like it's a very kind of throwaway thing. It's something that was written, that was decided it wasn't so great, and then just pushed gently onto the B-side of She Loves You. But it's quite interesting to have one of the great Beatles singles backed by something that people thought might potentially have been a single at some point, until they woke up to the fact that it's just lacking in that maturity that seems to be coming through in other parts of their songwriting.
Yeah, I think that's probably a relatively fair assessment. I don't think this is one that we're going to be particularly divided on when it comes to our opinions. It's not a bad song. It's one of those songs that I kind of honestly pretty much forgot existed until we started doing this podcast. And you run through the list of songs, and I was, oh yeah, that's that one. And I sort of listened to it a couple of times, and it's all right, but it did kind of get stuck in my head a wee bit. It was definitely a song which had a little bit of an earworm thing going on. It did kind of. I'd be walking along the street, and I'd just say, oh yeah, and stop singing that song, and I just couldn't quite manage to get it shifted out of my head.
It's quite interesting.
Annoying.
It's quite interesting you say that you'd forgotten about it, because I never knew it existed, not having been an aficionado of Beatles B-sides. So when I saw that the title was I'll Get You, I assumed it was sort of up there in the same category of song as Run for Your Life. I sort of assumed, and then finding out that it was originally called I'll Get You in the End, I still thought it was going to be on the same vein as Run for Your Life. I mean, it just sounds vaguely threatening. But actually what you get is a song that's probably not that dissimilar in tone and mood to something like Freddie and the Dreamers' You Were Made For Me. It's like, oh, we belong together, believe it. Oh, isn't that fantastic? And that's also the point in terms of the songwriting, because the lyrics are going back to first album level of triteness.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's one of those lyrics that it's pretty hard to pull much out of it. There seems to be a thing, this is mentioned in the wiki page, and I think it's in the Ian MacDonald book as well, that apparently it's incredibly impressive that the song starts in the word imagine. Imagine I'm in love with you.
Oh no, don't tell me they're drawing comparisons to some other song that uses the word imagine. Think, oh, this could be linked to, imagine.
There's a quote on the wiki page. Now, how much you want to put any emphasis on this is up to yourself. In fact, I will be interested to hear how much credence you are prepared to give this.
Go for it.
This is quoting directly from the wiki page. McCartney would cite this, the fact that the song opens with the line, imagine I'm in love with you, and drawing the listener into the story. McCartney would cite this as an early example of Lewis Carroll's influence on Lennon's lyrics. Apply explored again in such compositions as Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Strawberry Fields Forever, and Lennon's solo Imagine. Any thoughts on that?
A few. Good for him. Good for him. He's
Yeah.
earned the right.
It's nice he thinks that.
He's earned the right to intellectualize some of these earlier songs. That's fine. Knock yourself out, mate. I'm not going to criticize him for that because he's Paul McCartney. And you know what? Go for it. But on the other hand, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you see, quite often you'll read interviews with Lennon where he will talk about. He will change his tune from a previous interview, and say, "Oh no, this was written by me," or "That was," or "I hate this," or "I like that," and that's fine. Chances are that McCartney's done so many interviews, he can't actually remember what he said before about certain songs. And with the passing of time, so what? Does it matter? Not really. There are plenty of other people out there who will try and intellectualise the Beatles canon, and hello, we're guilty of that. That I've got no problem with him coming up with stuff like that, even though it just sounds like it's, I don't know which cliche to use. Gilding the lily, over egging the pudding. I don't care which word.
Not true. Not true.
Not true. Yeah, in terms of cliches, that's not quite as strong.
No.
I'll go.
No.
It's fine.
But I feel accuracy may be on its side.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, if you want to over intellectualize a lyric, I mean, it does have that possessive nature, which is very kind of Lennon-esque. I'll get you. I'm telling you. There is a sort of relentlessness to that side of the lyric, if you want.
Get is a very interesting word to use in that respect. And whether or not they were just fishing around for something that's a little bit different in order to sound a little bit different, I don't know. But it certainly has. Danny Baker, people will be aware of unless they live in Mexico or Sweden. Used to do this thing where he'd say it just completely change the meaning of something just by of pop lyrics, by changing the way that you say them. And he would use the example of, actually, if you just take a normal pop lyric and say it in a threatening voice, then it will sound really quite creepy. Well, it doesn't take much for "Imagine I'm in love with you. It's easy because I know. I've imagined," and you're not that far off sounding like the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang at that stage. And, "I'll get you in the end." I mean, well, okay, all right. So tone is important, and it's a good job that John Lennon therefore has such a happy, uplifting, melodious tone to his singing voice.
I mean, it's John Lennon. "I'll get you" in the end could quite easily just be about anal sex for him. It could go either way.
Well, that's what Lewis Carroll would have implied.
Absolutely.
Alice through the looking glass. I'll say no more.
Let's just quietly put that to one side, shall we?
I wonder what the Jabberwocky
I'm sorry, I mentioned
could be
it now.
For, but yeah.
Oh God.
The Jabberwocky through
moving
the
on.
glasses.
Anyway,
yeah, carry on.
Yep. Yes, it is just as well the delivery is so light and bouncy, and it helps to undercut any potential creepiness. You mentioned "Run for Your Life," but as we know, that will not always be the case with the Right Honourable Mr. Lennon's lyrics. So we should be grateful, at least, that's the case. That's the case here. And I mean, sort of along that, obviously, so much of this song is harmonised. It's not just the way that Lennon's delivering it, and McCartney's vocal over the top of Lennon's delivery kind of makes it even lighter and even more bouncier and even more... I'm struggling against the word chintzy here, but there is I mean, it's a well-worked-out harmony. They're singing it very well. It's competently done, but we've talked about harmonies quite a few times in the podcast, but this something about the way that it's done here that it just feels ever so slightly chintzy, a bit cliche is maybe not quite the right word, but it's not giving the song the lift that one would expect from that quality of harmony.
I think there's one point where it's actually an exception to that, or at least that first bit, not about the improving the quality, but the chintzy part. And that's the harmonisation on the "oh yeah," which frankly makes it sound sarcastic. And I think I've said this before, and maybe it's just you and I off air have had this discussion, but the oh yeahs on this song really do sound like he's taking the mick.
Yeah, but I think that might well be the case.
It's just very, very odd. That, oh yeah. Okay, thank you. But there is, because I don't think they quite worked out the harmonies for it, and they almost sound slightly discordant, which is interesting. And there are a lot of oh yeahs thrown in, and it's used as a bridge between the end of the chorus and getting back to the verse, for example, and from the middle eight back into the main part of the song as well. So I don't know. Is it just a case of overuse at that point? And are they aware, perhaps, as they're recording it, that it's not something that's going to properly work? Don't know.
I think that's kind of my take on it. I think they are sarcastic. I think they're taking the piss. I really think that. I think they're aware that this is a fairly slight song that they've put together in a way that they can sort of knock out fairly easily. I mean, sort of talking about the triteness of the lyric before, but you could read that whole lyric if you wanted to as a kind of sarcastic rejoinder to those kind of, you mentioned Freddie and the Dreamers, but any of those kind of song, or Cliff, or any of that stuff. The lyric is kind of in that idiom, I suppose, but it's also being undercut by these big sarky kind of oh yeahs, kind of, flagging up the fact that this isn't something which is meant to be taken at face value. It's not something which is meant to be seriously. They are just taking the piss out of it.
I would have sympathy with that argument. It's just the one thing that I find interesting about it is that there is that sort of undercurrent of that. We might talk about the fact that McCartney is stereotyped as the optimistic one, whereas Lennon is the one whose lyrics are full of self-doubt. I find it interesting that he's not talking about romanticizing, winning someone over. He's talking about wearing them down. And it says, so, well, there's gonna be a time when I'm gonna change your mind, so might as well resign yourself to me. Oh yeah. And there's something about that says, look, resign yourself to me. You come down to my level rather than me come up to you. That I don't know if that is sarcastic, more sort of fitting in within his oeuvre.
Yeah, that word resign is deeply unfortunate. There's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. But I mean, that's what I was saying earlier about that kind of possessiveness being such a kind of Lennon-esque trait, and the way that kind of plays out in the lyric. I think the argument that it's sort of piss take, which obviously I put forward, and yet I'm not wholly convinced by. But I think it's a valid reading, if not necessarily a valid reading I'm completely behind. But like that resign, that does work against that reading. It's just a bit too strong for that to be. You wouldn't get a lyric like that in a Cliff or in a Freddie and the Dreamers or Jerry and the Pacemaker. You don't really have that. So
and I wonder,
it is peculiarly Lennon-esque.
I wonder as well if it's another one of those occasions where, to refer back to old conversations that you, dear listener, may have heard on previous podcasts, particularly say of Thank You Girl, where because it's a B-side, they haven't exactly workshopped it for hours on end. So, people would have seen the clip from, even if they haven't seen Get Back, they've probably seen the clip of Lennon and McCartney helping George Harrison with something, where they're just saying, look, just sing nonsense stuff until you get something. And you wonder, therefore, if some of these lyrics are effectively placeholders, ready and waiting for something better to come along should it be needed, which I suppose is entirely possible. But actually, to then sort of make another link to Thank You Girl, we do have here quite an immature melody as well. It is another one of those ones. It was one of the points I made about Thank You Girl, is that it just kind of jumps around and it feels odd with some of the more crafted melodies that are starting to appear at this time. And it's interesting to think that they're recording this not exactly but around the same time that they were recording with the Beatles. Because it's not that long between them recording with the Beatles and I Want to Hold Your Hand, and looking at the start of With the Beatles, where you've got It Won't Be Long, All I've Got to Do, and All My Loving, and you just think the level of maturity that goes into those melodies and those songs in general compared to this, it really does feel like something that perhaps they would have been singing on that float as the Quarrymen all those years before. It just sounds like the kind of song that someone writes in the very early days of their songwriting experience, where they go, oh, okay, let's see what note goes with this note. Oh, that's okay. Let's see what note goes with this note. Oh, that's okay. And then when you play it back, you realise you've got a melody that jumps all over the place. And you think, maybe they would have looked back on it a few years later and thought it was a really, really good song until they listened to it.
Yeah, I think the word we might be skating around here is perfunctory. There is a slightly perfunctory nature to a lot of what's going on here, and I think you're right. I don't think it's difficult to imagine this being played in 1957 as well as 1963. I think that's a perfectly valid opinion of it, and it kind of does speak to that. I mean, like, even the harmonica in this feels kind of perfunctory. I mean, it's there, it's not really doing all that much. I suppose it's a little bit of extra texture, it's a little bit of color in a song which isn't really got a lot going on in it, but it's still pretty just kind of stand up there, blow, walk away.
I do find it interesting that it's so low in the mix.
Yeah, well, if again, Wiki is to be believed, that it's because it was a kind of a last minute addition, and I think it's fair to say it shows this time out.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, it's the instrumentation on it is to use your word, perfunctory as well. It just kind of feels a little bit chugging in the background, almost wedding band, playing, just saying, right, okay, right, I want you to play this, this, and this, and they just go out and they knock something out. It just doesn't really sound like anything has been properly worked out, which would fit your perfunctory theory.
Out of curiosity, you know, I don't know if you have, but you normally have your stats for how often this song has been played live. Is it one that got belted out frequently?
Do you know what? I haven't even bothered to look it up.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you at the spot like
on air, if you like.
Yeah, definitely look it up, because it would be curious. There's something on the wiki about the fact that they performed it for a verse of it for Pop Go the Beatles or something like that. But it would be interesting to know whether it's one that they actually ever, found worthy of putting in a gig when they weren't just promoting the single that it comes from. So yeah, well, I'm just going to keep vamping here until you manage to find the statistics that we're looking for. It's a lovely day here, a little bit cloudy, but it's quite warm, and it definitely feels like spring is springing. This has no relevance to anything that we're talking about, but if I can get through this without hesitation,
that's fine. I'm almost there.
We'll be doing fine. Although I definitely have deviated from the subject as it stands. If nothing else, this is massively increasing the runtime in an episode that I'm surprised has scraped over 5 minutes at this point. So that's something to look forward to.
I'm just going to take my time now to leave you hanging on.
Yeah, thanks. That's how you keep me hanging on. That's a great song. Excellent. I could probably talk about that for a few minutes, but I'm not going to, because that would require me to have some prior knowledge or have done any research on it whatsoever, which obviously I haven't done. So there we go. Lovely. Get a bloody move on.
Yeah. All right. I'm looking. It's not looking promising so far. It would help if my powerful computer actually responded to Control F. So otherwise, I'm actually having to do a manual check. Professional
podcasters would have paused and edited around this, but that's not what we are, and I'm pretty sure that's not what our fans in Mexico and Sweden want. Oh, that's something I can talk about.
Oh, got it.
Mexico has rocketed up the list. Okay. Oh, sorry. Go on. I'm excited now.
Now, bearing in mind that I usually chuck in the caveat that this is setlist.fm, which is obviously a a crowdsourced website rather than something that is going to be absolutely 100%. But what's quite interesting is that it is saying it comes at the 58th most played Beatles song live. Now, bearing in mind that P.S. I Love You comes in at joint number 62, you go, ooh, okay, well, that's quite interesting. Played apparently a massive 8 times. Now, this is where I know that the stats are out. If you bear in mind that just above it, it says Kansas City, hey, 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 hey. And a little bit further up, you've got things like, Dizzy Miss Lizzie. And I must imagine that they probably played Dizzy Miss Lizzie more than 17 times. So, there's some incomplete stats there. So we're saying 8 times. First time, July 16th, 1963. And to back up your theory, finishing on October 13th, 1963. And let's see. Oh, Fairfield Hall's Croydon. Blimey, blast from the past. You've got, I think, 2 of those 8 are, in fact, no, one's the Paris Theatre, London, so that's almost certainly a radio recording. You've got the Aeolian Hall Studio 2, which sounds like it's also a BBC type recording. And then you've got Television House in October as well. So it doesn't look like it's played at many gigs at all. Which would make sense.
Yeah, perfunctory. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, that was well worth the wait. I think
And interestingly, even the Fairfield Hall's Croydon set, the set list for that, it's just really weird. It's a 5-song set, so I don't know if that was part of some sort of package tour. You got I Saw Her Standing There. You got a Chuck Berry cover, Memphis, Tennessee. I'll Get You, She Loves You. And then Lucille, a Little Richard song. An odd little set.
That's an interesting little set.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So to answer my question, it's not been played live very much.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's excellent. Thank you. Much appreciated. Interesting. Kansas City. How many times? That can't be right. Or unless it's like out with the Star Club where there's just no possible records.
Well, that's what I mean. It's almost something that was played a considerable number of times, but not listed.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
So, the earliest recording here, it says 22nd of August, 62 at the Cavern Club. There's a couple of Cavern Club mentions. Apparently they played it on Christmas Day, 1962 at the Star Club in Hamburg. But you kind of figure that they probably did play it considerably more times than that, because it's just one of those sort of big, loud covers that they like doing. So, pinch of salt and all of that. Pinch of salt.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Well, I suppose we should try and drag this conversation back either to the song that we're talking about or to a close.
Well, I'll give you one, okay? Because actually, to link in with what I was saying about with the Beatles, of course, with the Beatles does open with "It Won't Be Long." Yeah, 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 yeah. So, you've got 2 songs quite close together that open with lots of yeahs. And yet one just sounds a complete world away from the other. That opening, as we'll talk about next time we get together, to, It Won't Be Long on With the Beatles, is just such a blast compared to this. And, so you've got the oh yeahs there compared to the yeah, yeah, yeah. And, even the using the yeah in a very different sense. That and yet actually think about it, because It Won't Be Long Till I Belong to You is very different from oh yeah, I'll get you in the end. In tone, very different. In subject matter, actually pretty similar. But one is so much more mature than the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And also because It Won't Be Long has the call and response as well. The yes are call and response rather than just sung straight. So even that, I mean, it's not a big thing, but it just pushes it into completely different territory.
Which is a good way of trailing.
We'll be talking about next week.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So, hey, watch out for that, folks.
Yeah. Keep your ear to the speaker ground. Yeah, listen to it. That's the thing. Listen
Keep
to
your
it.
ear to the podcast feed.
Yeah, you can contact us by email. We are BeatlesStuffology@gmail.com. We're on Twitter @Beatles_ology. And you can find more of my writing at www.jgmacquarie.scot. Please like, rate, and review us on whatever podcatcher you're using so that more people can find the show. Next episode, well, you know what we're doing next episode. It won't be long, and so we will finally get stuck in to With the Beatles. And as always, we hope you're going to join us for it. But until then, keep listening.